Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another Star Wars Expanded Universe book study. It's been a while since we did one of these. Hopefully you were able to join us a couple weeks ago as we did our introduction to this book. Al and I talked about what was going on and how is what to expect. Mute my YouTube there. So if you missed it, no big deal. You're still fine. We haven't started the actual book yet. We're doing that tonight. And we are doing Darth Plagueis, starting it tonight with the first 5 chapters. And it's a really good book. We'll get into it. Before I bring my co-host in, I will just announce, as you saw in the chat, hopefully we're starting a few minutes late because I was putting my daughter to bed. She still is awake, just in bed in the other room. So it's perfectly possible that she'll call out or need something from me or whatever. If that's the case, I'll stop and be right back. But Al will fill the space there. Do you want to go ahead and just advertise my Second Cup Cafe shirt there? Fan Man's show. He's got merch and whatnot. If you be sure to check out his Second Cup Cafe show tomorrow morning. I forget exactly what time he'll be doing it. Maybe Al will know. But he's going to talk about Father's Day, great fathers and fiction and whatnot. I'll be talking about the same topic, although my own spin on it, tomorrow night on my live stream, as usual. So got some good content for you on the weekend. Without further ado, though, let me go ahead and welcome my co-host, as always, to these Star Wars EU streams, Mr. Darth Sever.
Ever dance with a Sith Lord by the pale moonlight?
That's an interesting mashup.
I know.
What is Darth Sever's answer to that?
I'll dance wherever you want.
No, Jack Napier said, I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
Wow. I didn't
think that far, right?
Didn't think that far. I was just trying to do a little cute cue in, and
welcome to everybody in the chat that's with us here live. I know a lot of people watch these recorded as well, and welcome to you guys watching it recorded as well. But we did have Ghost Planet Max, Inc. 1.0 with us, Horizon Talker, Nathaniel Zalozballs joining us for these. So he's in a dead hour at work. That's good. Tricon 40, Darth Enigma. Nice one. I don't think there was there.
Better be the only other Darth. Rule 2 can only have 2.
That's right. We can only have 2. Although we're going to see that stretched a bit with Plagueis' era moving into Sidious and whatnot.
It always stretches.
Yeah. Darth Enigma. The name does sound familiar. So yeah, pretty sure.
I actually, for some reason, it's familiar to me too.
Yeah. But
not lately, but like on these, here, not on my channel.
Yeah, on the book studies. Anakin Solo, seen you around there as well. Andre Hernandez, great to see everybody here. So we're going to get into it here in a second. One of the points we're going to make right off the bat, let me just go ahead and say this by way of introduction. Darth Plagueis in particular really is a great representation for me of what I love so much about the Star Wars EU. You know, people ask me why, because I'm a big proponent of the EU, not, the Disney canon, not any of these other things. And people ask why, or some people just assume, oh, well, you've just decided you're going to be an EU fanboy. That's just the thing that you're going to like or be loyal to. No, there's specific reason why I really love the EU. I think it's special. I think it's kind of unique, not just in Star Wars fiction, but in shared fictions in general. And Darth Plagueis is a good representation of that. When the EU started, the only thing out there film-wise or canon-wise, so to speak, was the original trilogy. And the EU was written not by George Lucas. He presided over it, and kind of made sure he was approving things that came out, but it was written by fans. It was written by writers and whatnot. They were professional writers, but they were fans of Star Wars. A lot of people were just chomping at the bit, falling over each other, trying to be able to write in the Star Wars universe because everybody had wanted more stories since the films came out. And outside of the Marvel comics, you really didn't have anything like that. Or a few tie-in books, some backgrounds of Lando or something like that, or Han or something like that. So the EU book started, and what you ended up having is people that just truly respected the original trilogy, the spirit of it. In every EU book I've ever read, and I haven't read them all by any means, I'm still thoroughly enjoying going through them. There are some that are more subpar in quality, and there are some that are really great, like I think Darth Plagueis is. But I've never read a single entry into the EU that betrays the spirit of Star Wars, that betrays the spirit of that original trilogy. And I always say, I know Fanman agrees with this. It'll be interesting to see what you think, Al. Star Wars is Luke Skywalker. Now, you can say that some people would basically agree with me, but they would say Star Wars is Anakin. Anakin and Luke, their stories are so intertwined that I think it's pointless to try to have the argument that one over the other or whatever. But Luke's the culmination of that. Luke succeeds where Anakin fails in terms of bringing balance to the Force and whatnot. So even if you have stories set centuries before Luke, that still takes place in this universe, which is moving towards that moment of the prophecy's fulfillment of a balance in the Force. Even if you have stories about bounty hunters, have nothing to do with the Jedi or the Force, it's still set in that universe that's moving towards that moment of balance in the Force. Or stories set centuries after Luke, as it, they did at the end of the EU there, are still looking back to that moment. So it's a very pivotal moment. And I always resist the idea of people saying Star Wars can be more than just Luke Skywalker. Gosh. Like, well, yes, in terms of the subject matter, but no, in terms of the theme. If you're trying to separate that completely, then you're really telling the wrong kind of story. It's not fitted for the Star Wars universe. Darth Plagueis is interesting because it ties together so many great things in the EU. Now, it's really cool that we'd read the Darth Bane trilogy before, because we're going to see it tie into a lot to that. But other things it ties into, and I'll talk a little bit more of how it gets into the story of the original trilogy here. But what do you think about that concept, Al? Just want to give you a chance to respond to it.
I'm probably a little farther. Well, how do I want to say this?
Well, I mean, I know that you're also, you like the Disney continuity stuff, so I'm not asking about that necessarily. I'm just asking about
not all of it. not the sequel. The sequel trilogy, no. But my
point is, I'm not laying a trap for you. I just want to know. What
I have been enjoying the live action series. I haven't watched any of the animated series, but you were talking about it being Star Wars being Luke Skywalker.
Mm-hmm, yeah,
and I would say I see what you're talking about,
mm-hmm.
in that the spirit of Luke Skywalker as a particular kind of a hero that sets a tone within the stories that are told in this universe. I do believe that the stories that are told outside of Luke Skywalker's I want to say realm of influence, where he, before he was alive or after or sideways or whatever, should still be in the spirit of the kind of stories that the original trilogy told.
Mm-hmm.
Now that being said, of course the sequel trilogies, not so much. And even you can make a case the prequels kind of were a little iffy because it got a little but I really, after the sequel trilogies, I really have a new appreciation for the prequels.
A lot of people do.
And you say Luke Skywalker in particular, if you just look at the original trilogy, but if you look at all, let's just get out there, 9 films plus Rogue One and Solo. Yes, they exist.
They're not in EU canon, and that's what this book study
not
follows.
in EU. Okay, I'll give you that. Not in EU canon. But what I am saying, I totally lost what I was saying because I ran into the brick wall that is.
I think you were going for also Anakin's story tied into Luke's, like it was the Skywalker saga.
Yeah. Where
I'll give you that.
It began. It's Anakin through Luke, and then through Luke. And I will agree with you to the end of the universe. It should have been Ben and then Jason and Jana. Mm-hmm. Whose stories I have never read, and something maybe to have in the future.
We'll get to it, yeah.
But I mean, there are other interesting stories to be told, like I said, and outside of his pure influence.
We'll
like a Darth Plagueis, or like when we did like the Harvest, the Red Harvest,
Yeah, yeah,
and the Darth Bane trilogy. I mean, like I said, there was no real Luke Skywalker or anybody there, but even through a book where the Sith Lord is the main character, there's still that
the
spirit
yeah,
of the original trilogy, and it's kind of the storytelling that it propagated.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Well, let's jump right in, so we don't take too much time up before we actually get to the text with the prologue. And the prologue is kind of an example of what I'm saying here. And I'll read just the opening paragraph of the prologue. Now, think about somebody. Star Wars fans knew about Darth Plagueis, obviously, from Revenge of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming to a book that's about Darth Plagueis. But what I think is really interesting that Luceno does, Luceno, I think is how you pronounce the name, but he shows us from the very beginning that this is not a book about an all new separate character with an all new separate story. I mean, Plagueis has his own story, but his story is very much a part of Sidious's story, just as Anakin and Luke are sort of related. And we have this opening in the prologue that's very powerful. It says, a tremor shook hold of the planet. A tremor took hold of the planet. Sprung from death, it unleashed itself in a powerful wave, at once burrowing deep into the world's core and radiating through its saccharine atmosphere. To shake the stars themselves, at the quake's epicenter stood Sidious. One elegant hand vised on the burnished sill of an expansive translucency, a vessel filled suddenly to bursting. The force so strong within him that he feared he might disappear into it, never to return. But the moment didn't constitute an ending so much as a true beginning. Long overdue, it was less a transformation than an intensification, a gravitic shift. And we find out as we keep going that he's just killed Plagueis. That's a pretty ballsy place to start your book called Darth Plagueis. You know, let's start with his death, and not only his death, but let's start in the perspective of a different character, pretty well known to Star Wars fans. So he's showing that the stories are very much intertwined, and I like that he sets up thematic connections and elements here. Just as Sidious senses this great outpouring of the dark side, you know, in these moments after he's killed Plagueis, which we know all Sith apprentices, you know, eventually do or try to do. They try to kill their masters to take their place. We get a sense of what the dark force is right now. Dark side of the force is in terms of its own progress, its own unveiling of the plan. We have, for example, he talks about fate, you know, and how moments are there and you have to react and act on these moments. Sidious is talking about the way he acted on killing Plagueis just now, and he says, one heartbeat late and the universe would have recomposed itself. No imposition of will sufficient to forestall the currents. One could only observe and react. Surprise was the element absent from any periodic table, a keystone element, a missing ingredient, the means by which the force amused itself, the reminder to all sentient beings that some secrets could never be unlocked. Confident that the will of the dark side had been done, he returned to the suite's windowsill. And then later it says the dark side had made him its property, and now he made the dark side his. Had the force ever been so strong in anyone, you know? And it's interesting that, you know, as Al mentioned, we just did the Darth Bane trilogy. Not just did it, but that's one of the last studies we did. And we see with Darth Bane and initiating the rule of two, a clear progression in the dark side of the force where Bane said the Sith Empire is hindering itself. We need to be cut down to no more than two so that it can be purified, rarefied, and hide from the Republic and grow to the point at which it can ultimately again become an empire. That was the goal all the time, but it was just going to be a long time of the rule of two. Now we're here, obviously, with Sidious. We know he creates an empire again, a Sith empire, even though your average person in a planet or whatever wouldn't call it that. So it also kind of explains a little bit why there are multiple dark side users. especially in the EU. We've got Maul, and then you've got Darth. What was Dooku's Sith name again?
Tyrannus.
Tyrannus, yeah, thank you. You've got, if you go into the EU, you've got Starkiller, of course, trained by Vader later and whatnot, Vader himself and all these kind of stuff. So you have a lot of sort of dark side acolytes or Sith Force users, even though you maybe officially only have one master and one apprentice at a time. But we're starting to get more into the Empire wave of it, so it kind of explains more why there aren't just two Sith strictly, and that's it. What I'm gonna say next is gonna kind of close out the prologue. So let me let you make any comments you want to about it first.
Yeah, we were talking. We're talking about the dark side of the Force. I like the way that the author makes the dark, personifies it.
Mm-hmm.
The dark side of the Force isn't. It's living. It's alive. It uses the word anointing.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Sidious. It's and I think that I like that it's not just a power to tap into, but it's something that almost has a will of its own.
Yeah,
that is. I don't know if I would view it as a puppet master
mm-hmm.
or. We talk about the rule of two, a master and an apprentice. Is it the master's master
mm-hmm.
In and of itself?
Yeah, and we really do see. I like what you're saying there, because we really do see in Darth Plagueis as we move forward, even with Plagueis's fascination with like the midichlorians and whatnot. This novel really does contextualize it as a will. It's not taking the Force any place it's not supposed to go in the Star Wars universe. It's still this, big, the Force. It's not like a personal God necessarily, but there are these two wills, the dark side will and the light side will, and there are ways in which the dark and light sides will reconfigure themselves if there's a hiccup or when it tries to bring about this or that, and we do see that kind of, which plays into ultimately needing a prophecy or whatever.
And basically, I think if I remember correctly, the midichlorians are more a way that the Force communicates to the individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not necessarily the Force itself.
Right. It's how in tune you're able to be, how much of a connection you will have.
Yeah.
The more midichlorians, the bigger the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what Plagueis kind of figured he could go all the way, and
yeah, we'll get into that here. Let me read the last little section here of the prologue, because it boots us into the book, and I think it's a really neat tie into. They're thematically linked. Sidious had never learned how Plagueis' own master had met his end. Had he died at Plagueis' hand? Had Plagueis too experienced a similar exaltation on becoming a sole Sith Lord? Had the beast of the end time risen then to peek at the world it was to inhabit, knowing its release was imminent? That's a great line. I'm going to just read that again. Had the beast of the end time risen then to peek at the world it was to inhabit, knowing its release was imminent? So Sidious is saying, I know right now the beast of the dark side is here. It's in me. We're going to change things. Had it reared its head a little bit for Plagueis?
Yeah, again, that giving it a characterization of its own.
Yeah, personification of it. Yeah. He raised his gaze to the eclipse. He raised his gaze to the ecliptic. The answers were out there, coded in light, speeding through the space and time. Liquid fire coursing through him, visions of past and future rifling through his mind. He opened himself to the reconfigured galaxy, as if in an effort to peel away the decades.
Now, can I just say something really quick?
Yeah.
Were you, like I was, getting Highlander vibes?
I didn't.
The quickening, the dark side is the quickening, and
you're right.
Like, it's coursing through him.
I did not make that connection, but you're right. That's a good one. Now, right here, as he said, he's in an effort to peel away the decades. Then we have part one, enlistment, 67 to 65 years before the Battle of Yavin. So we've got. It's almost you're led to think: is Sidious seeing the past? Is he seeing now? Because now we jump immediately to the scene in which Plagueis kills his master and becomes the Sith Lord. And And so we got that thematic link, and we do find Plagueis experience something just like the quickening, like Al said, just similar to what Sidious felt there. Okay, just a second. I'm being called away for milk, so I'm going to have to slip and do that real quick. I told you there'd probably be a couple of little interruptions like that. Let me go take care of her. Al, you can talk more about the Highlander thematic links while I'm gone here.
Well, first of all, Nathaniel, you've never seen Highlander. Okay, right after this book study, go to wherever you can find it and watch it. It's just really cool. Also, a great series that came about. Don't worry about Highlander 2. Please don't even worry about Highlander 2. But while he's away, hey, let me talk a little bit about my channel. I saw The Flash, did a review of it. It is on my channel. More than 10 words to say about it. So if you want to know what I thought of the new Flash movie, definitely go check there. Plus, I got a lot of other reviews, 10-word or less reviews, or, the odd full review like I did for The Flash and Little Mermaid. Wow, I am getting a thunderstorm. Just heard a little crack of thunder. So let's see. Dad's going. Oh yeah, Dad's going to get the milk.
All good.
Yeah, I just told Nathaniel to go watch Highlander as soon as he could.
It's good stuff. I like the series on USA too. That was fun. I am Duncan MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod.
Born 400 years ago in the Highlands of Scotland, I am immortal and I am not alone.
Oh yeah, the intro. Yeah. So we open on a scene of Plagueis with his.
If you hear thunder, don't worry. I'm getting a thunderstorm here. It seems.
Okay. Yeah, definitely good to know. We open here with Plagueis with his master Darth Tenebrus, and they're on this planet and they're doing some mining. There's a droid there, leading the mining. And before I talk about what they're doing, I was talking to Al a little bit. You've got Plagueis, we talked about last time, who's a Muun, one of the banking clan, the Muuns, these tall, lanky, not particularly intimidating looking beings. And then you've got Tenebrus, his master, who's a Bith. Bith are the aliens in the cantina playing the little, clarinet
cantina band, yeah.
These are not the most imposing or intimidating, two species to be the Sith here in this final moment.
Well, not to us. I mean, because like I said, our experience with the Bith is, and the Muun. Although the Muun can be physically intimidating.
They're tall.
They're tall. Well, maybe not physically, but I could see them being psychologically intimidating because they look like the Slender Man.
Yeah, true.
Which is kind of a freaky look.
True. I will recommend to people, you really ought to get the essential guides to Star Wars. The you should be in here in the picture. There it is. They're not comprehensive, but they do have pictures of a lot of the different alien races, and then they've got sort of an encyclopedic section. For most of the essential guides, there's editions that were done before the prequels, and then editions after the prequels, like this. That's a Muun on the cover, actually. The right there. So I would recommend getting both the ones done before the prequels and the ones done after the prequels, because the editions that came after the prequels did cut some of the EU stuff to include some of the prequel stuff. But it's good to just kind of know who you're talking about when you. I mean, other than that, the internet's your friend. The Wikipedia or Wikipedia.
Wikipedia.
Useful. Now, why? Why would he choose these two alien races? As they're there mining, they talk about. I think Tenebrus says Darth Bane would approve of our efforts. The Sith Master was telling his apprentice as they stood side by side in the crystalline cave. They had drawn them across the stars. And he's talking about ultimately because they're there mining coriodite, if I'm pronouncing that right. And that was the substance that Bane grew up on a mining planet, of coriodite. There have been a lot of Sith, a lot of important Sith since Bane and Xana, all the way down to Plagueis and Bith, or Plagueis and Tenebrus, or Sidious. So you have to ask yourself, is it, why do you keep dropping Bane? Is it just because that was a popular trilogy of novels? No, he's really making a good thematic link here. Think about Bane and Xana. Bane was a huge, imposing figure, especially when he had the Sith beetle armor all over him. I mean, he was terrifying. And Xana was pretty wicked looking too. Young woman that she was pretty the evil eyes, But now we're down to a Muun and a Bith, who physically, just looking at them, someone on the street, they're not all that imposing, but that's where the Sith have become. The Sith have come so far to which they're hiding in plain sight. They want to look unopposing. They're trying to hide the fact that there even is a dark side at this point. They're in the Republic inner workings and whatnot. So we've come a long way.
And they have their public personas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're known. They work. They do business.
Exactly. And we don't know everything that's happening here yet. They're part of some scheme where they're trying to get this Corridite on the planet Bal'demnic.
Well, it messes with lightsabers.
It's resistant to lightsabers. Yeah. And
so even more for its intrinsic ability to diminish the effectiveness of the Jedi lightsaber.
Yeah. So it was heavily regulated. Mining of it was heavily regulated by the Republic and the Jedi in general. And they were saying probably because they didn't want this thing being, ubiquitous out there that could challenge the all authority and all powerfulness of the lightsaber. There's a point though where they're talking, they're on the surface, or they're in a cave, down below, but they're on sort of a surface level, and they're talking to this mining droid that's in contact, it's in communication with the actual drill droid in the ground that's doing the drilling. And the drill droid's talking to the mining droid, and eventually at some point, somehow the drill droid has been compromised, sabotaged or whatever by someone, and it's going towards this pocket of gas that's going to cause an explosion. So Tenebrus and Plagueis have to leave. And there's this one moment that's interesting. They said Plagueis hesitated, then nodded. As you say, Master. Tenebrus swung to the droid. Continue your attempts to deactivate the unit. I will, sir. To do that, however, I will need to remain here. What of it? Tenebrus said, cocking his head to one side. Should I fail in my efforts, the ensuing explosion will surely result in my destruction. Plagueis understood. You've been useful, droid. Thank you, sir. Tenebrus scowled. You waste your breath. So we're dealing with the Sith Lord who has this kind of soft spot for droids. It's an interesting one that we'll see kind of develop, at least with a certain droid in particular. And we're building his character here. The Darth Plagueis is a legend. So when James Luceno is writing this, knowing that his audience is coming along with him this far, they've got so many legendary possible hypotheses or stories or whatever, things that could possibly be true about Plagueis. How is he going to tell them who Plagueis is? He can't just write a diatribe. This is what the character is and blah, blah, blah. That's a rookie mistake for an immature writer. So he has to show it. And he shows Plagueis having this sort of sympathy for droid. I wouldn't even call it sympathy, but just sort of an understanding.
An empathetic moment. He realizes that the droid, to put an emotional term on it, is kind of scared that he might be blown up.
and I think for Plagueis, it's empathy, but with intellectual understanding rather than emotion, because Plagueis himself he's like a sociopath. He sees the world around him; it's only there to serve him. He doesn't have emotional ties to people, but he also is very, very much concerned about his own longevity. He wants eternal life. That's what he's trying to study the midichlorians and whatnot to achieve. And so a droid, very much like him in terms of cold intellect, wanting to survive too, kind of, he understands that, which is an interesting little moment. They're on their way to try to escape. They get to the point where their ship is there. The rocks are falling and whatnot, and Plagueis takes his moment. Plagueis, they're both using the Force to kind of hold up the rocks that are falling, to hold the avalanche off their ship. And Plagueis finds his moment in the Force, that one moment where he takes the rocks that are being held up and shoves them down on top of Tenebrus, his master, to kill him. Now, we know from reading Darth Bane that that's not how Sith are supposed to challenge each other, right? Darth Bane himself, he was very angry with Xana. That's the whole point of the third book, when he thinks that she's waiting for him to get old enough so that he'll be easier to conquer. And he's like, that's not going to improve the strength of the Sith. That's not going to purify us down the line. you challenged me when I'm at my prime, and if you can defeat me then you deserve to be, Sith Master. So this is a very sort of different type of Sith. We see them how they've evolved to this point, sort of underhanded trickery and whatnot.
Yeah, a little more sneaky.
Yeah. And I got some points here. Tenebrus was paralyzed and unconscious, but not yet dead. And Plagueis is, he has a little talk with him and whatnot. Tenebrus tries to warn Plagueis about something, but he doesn't quite get to it. He sort of loses consciousness a little bit. Plagueis leaned away from him, nonchalant, but in fact filled with icy fury. I'll find a way home, Plagueis says, because Tenebrus says, oh, you've let the ship die, you're an idiot or whatever. And with a chopping motion of his left hand, he broke the Bith's neck. Tenebrus was paralyzed and unconscious, but not yet dead. Plagueis had no interest in saving him, even if it were possible, but he was interested in observing the behavior of the Bith's midichlorians as life ebbed. The Jedi thought of the cellular organelles as symbiotes. Not to Plagueis, midichlorians were interlopers. But to Plagueis, midichlorians were interlopers, running interference for the Force and standing in the way of a being's ability to contact the Force directly. Like a middleman, like an annoying middleman for Plagueis. Through the years of experimentation and directed meditation, Plagueis had honed an ability to perceive the actions of midichlorians, though not yet the ability to manipulate them. And that's what he's moving towards. So we get a little bit of a sense, and we're going to find out later more of his experimentation and what he's really going for there. But we do know that he's interested in this, and Tenebrus didn't know much about it. So he stands up. He's got to figure out how to. Go ahead.
It's kind of a dark thing to sit there and kind of sense the midichlorians of your master or what they're doing as he slowly.
It's interesting how you're dying. Oh, look at your body doing this,
Yeah, but something earlier I kind of like as all this is going on. Plagueis says, I will avenge you. Not because of what he did, but because of the what happened with the droid.
The sabotage.
The sabotage. Droid, yeah. So it's kind of an interesting way. It's like, yeah, it kind of worked out for me, but you can die knowing that I will get the bad guys who kind of
continue with the plan. Yeah, definitely. So he's as he's planning on how to escape and how to get out of here, we get this one little interesting moment. It has to do with what their alien species, how that comes to bear on here. It says, where Bith intelligence was grounded in mathematics and computation, Muun intelligence was driven by a will to profit. As a Muun, Plagueis viewed his allegiance to the Force as an investment that could, with proper effect, be maximized to yield great returns. That's a really fascinating way of putting it for Plagueis. It also plays into the sociopath angle of it. But my work with the Force, it's not altruistic. Heaven forbid it's self-sacrificing anyway. I'm investing. And I'm investing so that there'll be a payoff for me. He does nothing truly selflessly. He's investing and he wants a payoff, great returns. We also did see, I should mention before we leave the chapter, that as Sidious was watching Plagueis die in the prologue, in the future, he was also kind of interested in Plagueis's body. Not in the same way Plagueis was interested in watching Bith, the Tenebrus, die, but Sidious did just have a passing interest in watching the life kind of ebb from Plagueis. He wanted to make sure he was dead and so forth. So we do see the plan of the dark side, the ultimate scheme, the ultimate mission is slightly altered with the passing of each torch. It's interesting.
Yeah, well, you get a different Sith Lord. It's a different philosophy, a different. I think ultimately they have the same outcome. It's just how they are going to proceed to get that outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he also says, Darth Bane would not have approved of how I did this and whatnot. It says, Tenebrus died while Plagueis observed. In Bane's age, a Sith might have had to guard against an attempted essence transfer by the deceased, a leap into the consciousness of the Sith who survived. But those times were long past and of no relevance. Not since the teachings had been sabotaged, the technique lost. The last Sith possessed of the knowledge had been inexplicably drawn to the light side and killed, taking the secret process with him. And that was a Sith by the name of Darth Gravid that is an interesting source as well, but we'll hear about him a little bit more as we go through here. So next we continue to follow Plagueis with chapter 2. He's got to figure out how to survive, how to get out of here, right? And he's wounded. He finds out he is wounded in the back some, but he's able to
pretty badly too. From what,
yeah, he's able to kind of call upon the Force to a certain degree to get through. He gets a change of clothes and whatnot, and he's making his way through Bal'demnic. And Bal'demnic is a planet. They've got these sort of low sentient reptiles, like not very civilized or whatever beings, and he's kind of hiding from them. He's not just cutting a swathing path through them, which he could, going inside and taking their food or whatever. He could do this. He thinks about it, but again, it's the plan. He doesn't want to draw attention, to himself. So he makes it to their starport eventually. And it's interesting on his starport. Let me see here what I've got here. Well, first, before we get to that, he's on his way. It's taking him a few days. He's even like staying in the crevices of the rocks overnight. At one point, the mosquitoes things are just constantly attacking him, and he stops fighting them. He just lets them draw the blood from his neck. It says, "Let them devour the old Plagueis," he thought. Awakened from a millennium of purposeful sleep, the power of the dark side would be reborn, and he, Plagueis, would carry the long-forged plan to completion. So again, the plan long forged from Bane being shifted a little bit, each and every time. Your moment has come. Claim your stake to the dark side. Act now. Be done with this. He felt that in the moment before he killed Tenebrus. And he says, to hear it told, Bane had even been hounded by the spirits of generations dead Sith Lords, whose tombs and manses he had desecrated in his fervent search for holocrons, the other ancient devices offering wisdom and guidance. Was Tenebrus' spirit the source of the power he sensed? Because he senses this power, he senses this other presence. Was there a brief period of survival after death, during which a true Sith could continue to influence the world of the living? So we constantly see this theme of life after death, or of longevity, of eternal life, or attempts at eternal life at some point. And we know that from the Bane trilogy, reading it, there have been, the idea of essence transfer was first mastered in terms of transferring your essence to like a talisman or something like that you'd be buried with. So you have the ghost of a Sith guarding its tomb or something like that. And eventually, of course, in Bane and Xana's time, they're learning how to essence transfer to a different person. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna move to chapter 3 unless you have anything else to say about chapter 2.
No. Okay. I like the name of the ship.
The Wobegon.
The Wobegon.
Yeah. Now this is interesting. So he comes to the spaceport there, and he's looking for a ship, and he figures out, the ship that will most likely be able to take him to Muun, because he needs to go to Muun. And he settles on this ship called the Wobegon. It's got its crew, and we're told we're told a lot of information about its crew. We're told which alien species each member is. We find out that the captain, the Togruta, like Master Shakti, she is captain, but she also sees the ship as a democracy. Like they're all sort of equals together. They vote on things and whatnot. And we get the species of the different, members of the ship.
That would be a very weird. I don't know how efficient that would be in certain situations.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But they seem to they make it work, to a certain degree there. So there's this group, and I won't go into all of the descriptions and everything. There's a Balasor,
Platunian,
Aqualish. Aqualish was the alien that was about to take down Luke in the Cantina, the one who didn't like his face, wanted to fight him. And then there's one droid called 114D who's got these multi-appendages around him or whatever. The fact, though, that Luceno takes the time to explain and describe all the members of this crew, you kind of get the sense that this crew is going to be an integral part of the story. Like they're going to stick around. Why would you spend so much time on these characters and description? And in fact, Sound Engraver, who I forgot to say hello to Sound Engraver, she was at work and she chimed in the chat there. I saw it just passing when you were talking. I didn't get back to it, but hello, my dear Sound Engraver. She was asking me as she read, up to that part, she was reading the Wobegon chapter, and she was really curious. She's like, all right, what does this alien look like? What does this alien look like? And I didn't tell her, but secretly I'm thinking, don't get too attacked.
because it is. I'm like, wow, he's really giving us some good information. We're gonna we learn about him. Like, I guess this is kind of going to be his crew for. Oh no, it's not.
Nope. And he tries not to kill him at first. He stows away and he tries to tell them, look, I will pay you for my passage to Muun now that I've stowed away on your ship. And they decide not to, and it's the captain. She has this sort of sixth sense a little bit. She realizes something's not right about this guy. So they decide that they're just going to drop him off. Go ahead.
Am I misremembering? Didn't he kind of sense that she had a little bit of force sensitive to her?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what she uses to sense something's off about him.
But it was interesting. He did try. It was almost, he did want to come out. It's like, you don't want to do this. Trust me. You don't want to make the mistake.
Yeah. This is profitable to you if you will do what I say. Yeah. But alas, no. And we hear her say no, and then he just pretty much takes her out, and he's taken out the whole crew, and he's taking them out in interesting ways. He's not just efficiently killing them quickly and effectively as much as possible. It almost seems like he's toying with them in ways where he's trying to mortally injure them, but not outright kill them. And we know because he wants to watch them die, right? But it's interesting when we see him taking them out, we jump to the perspective of the droid, 114D. It says in the main cabin space, 114D had been monitoring the conversation of the crew members since their return from Cargo Bay 4. And he's watching, and he's originally a medical droid, but he's been adapted to be able to fly the ship and whatnot. So he's monitoring like the captain's heart rate and whatnot, and he's monitoring all these things about the individuals. And he sees Plagueis come in and just take these people out, and he sees Plagueis behave in a very unusual manner. Where it is. The Wobegon had just 114D's odd. Now I'm in chapter 4 now, Al. So if you wanted to stop and say anything about chapter 3, let me know. But we can always go back. It's all the Wobegon story.
No, but when they were discussing, should they, shouldn't they? I'm still thinking it's like, oh well, they're going to make the right decision. They're going to.
It's funny. You're kind of pulling for them to decide because this guy's dangerous. They don't. And you're like, just do what he wants. Just do what he wants, and you guys can split him.
You just want to take her and go, he's a Sith Lord.
I know. So as he watches, where's the part I had linked here? It's not there yet. As he's watching them die, he comes at one part which is really interesting. I know I underlined it. Let me just find it in this. Oh, there it is. Okay. The Muun appeared to be frustrated, and his disappointment increased on finding that Blur was deceased as well. So he's mad when he sees some of them that are already dead. He spent only moments appraising Semasili before going to Wandu, who was conscious, though obviously paralyzed from the waist down. You dishonor your heritage and your weapon, Jedi, Wandu managed to say. You could have used the Force to compel us to do as you wished. I've not only seen that, but experienced it. The Muun's face contorted in distaste. If you've so little will, he said, in the tongue of Wandu's species, then you're of no use to me, Klatooinian. And ended Wandu's misery with a click of his thumb and middle finger. That's dark, because we're going to find out he wants you to have a strong will to live so that he can play with your life and extend it a little bit and take it back or whatever. It's pretty dark.
Not worth it.
Yeah. So he takes out all these people, and 114D is like, I'm next. But he doesn't kill 114D. He starts asking him questions. Can you pilot this ship? Do this and that. Asking, how did you come to be on this ship? And we find out that 114D wasn't like purchased or doesn't really owe a lot of loyalty to the crew. He was a temporary exchange for the captain, but the captain decided to keep him long-term anyway, sort of, against the agreement or whatever, and modified him to do the ship.
Gave him some extra arms.
Yeah, it gave him some extra arms and whatnot. And then Plagueis has this moment where it's almost like a 114D's application for a job or something. Tell me, droid, what is the possible consequence of low thalaxian levels in a Paun? 114D didn't hesitate. One possible consequence would be an elevation of the oxidation rate, leading to the growth of the exoplasmatic goiter, which in turn would affect the production of the ronin from the anterior lobes of the luteolary gland. And one result might be giantism, well beyond the Pannonian norm. If so, the connecting ganglia making up the, he goes through all these, like, so he's testing him, and the droid knows all these things because he used to be a medical droid. So you are a diagnostician as well, in a minor capacity, sir. So he's, kind of, again, droids are useful. Droids don't have midichlorians, so they're not useful in the way to be test subjects, but they're possibly useful in other ways. And
yeah, I mean, destroying the droid has no benefit for him.
Yeah, he finally makes it to Muun. He has 114D pilot the ship to Muun. Then we get to see who he really is, and this is a cool. And we'll finish up with 11D here in a second. I just want to kind of go in order.
He also has him work on it, doesn't he?
A what?
Work at his back. He had a very bad.
Yeah, that's right.
wound.
The injury on his back. He gets 114D to fix the injury on his back.
It was bad from what if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So they park the ship there in Muun, and Plagueis gets out, and there's this Nikto and this Doug. Yeah, you remember the Doug from the pod racing episode 1 coming out. And this is a cool way to show this to the reader. We don't know who Plagueis is outside of just the Sith. But suddenly the Nikto says, Magister Damask, she began in basic. I had no foreknowledge. Plagueis cut her off. This isn't a social call. Of course, Magister. Regardless, do you wish me to apprise Boss Calbra of your visit? Is he on station? No, sir, but he can be reached by comm. That won't be necessary, Plagueis said. I'll contact him myself. As you wish, Magister. What services can this station provide? So he's a very important individual. People are kind of, and there's a way that they show this. There's a way they show this. First of all, you think about show, don't tell. We learn things from Plagueis and the way he sort of, I'm going to use the word empathize for lack of a better word with droids. We also see him take out the whole crew of the Wobegon, which shows you how evil he is. Thus far you've seen him take out his own Sith master. So yeah, he's a Sith, he's a bad guy, but you really don't get a sense of his evil nature until you actually see him take innocent lives. And so we saw that. Now we get to see how important he is through somebody kind of fawning over him, but not just that, you get to see how much power he has. Plagueis gestured in an offhanded way to the berthed freighter. This ship is to be sealed and slagged, because it still has the dead bodies on it. Without salvaging anything, the Doug said. Without salvaging anything, the Doug said. Plagueis looked at him. I said sealed and slagged. Do you need to hear it a third time? The Doug, because the Dougs are, angry little things, bared his teeth. Do you know who you're talking to, Muun? Plagueis cut his eyes to the Nikto. Who is this callow pup? Pup, the Doug repeated before the Nikto could intervene. Boss Cabra's youngest progeny, Magister, she said, quickly restraining the Doug with her extended left arm. He means no disrespect. Plagueis regarded the Doug again. What are you called, pup? The Doug's rear legs were tensed for a leap, but the Nikto whirled rapidly, slapping him across the fluid and broad-nostriled snout, and clamped a hand to his windpipe. Answer him, she bellowed into his snarling face, and with due respect. The Doug relented and whimpered through certainly more out of humiliation than pain. Darnata, it squeaked at last. Darnata, Plagueis repeated before addressing the Nikto. Perhaps young Darnata should be muzzled to prevent him from endangering his father's business relationships. So that shows you, he's somebody with power. It's also a cool way of, building audience or reader engagement in a character. We've talked about how you can do it through humor, sympathy, or competence. And if you've got a bad guy who's your protagonist, who you're not going to build emotional investment in. The readers aren't going to be pulling for the bad guy because they know he's bad, but you still have to have them invest in the bad guy enough to want to follow the story. And one way to do that is competence. And this is a really cool little moment of that, showing how important he is just as Magister Damask. And then going back to the droid there, the Nikto asks, okay, do you want even the droid slagged? Because this droid 114D is standing with him. And Plagueis, here's the moment. Plagueis looked over his shoulder at 114D. How much of your memory can be wiped without tampering with your medical protocols? I am modular in design, the droid said. My memory storage can be erased in its entirety or according to whatever parameters you establish. Plagueis considered that. Remain with the ship until it has been liquefied. I will expect a complete audio-vid recording. 114D raised his right side appendages to gesture acknowledgement. At your service, Magister Damask. So we see the The bromance has started, right?
Yeah.
Between 114D and Plagueis.
Well, a droid like that is I don't know the future in the story, but it's got to come in handy, especially the medical aspect, and could program him to be almost anything.
Yeah. Tom Spiegel's asking about the Niktos. Nikto, I might be pronouncing it slightly wrong. I think it's Nikto. Nikto, anyway. Yeah, there's a lot of different aliens. The Niktos are the ones, you've seen them before.
Klaatu Barada Nikto.
Yeah, there's the Nikto. You've seen them, especially if you've watched some Clone Wars episodes or whatever. But you've seen them in the original trilogy and whatnot. So now we're on our final chapter for the night. Before we keep going in there, Al, is there anything else you want to say about the previous chapters before I keep forging ahead on our last one?
No, but it's a good reveal. I mean, it's a good reveal that we're no longer got Sith who are stealth, keep you to the shadows. This guy's a major deal.
Yeah. And we know that's the case ultimately with Sidious, right? Becoming the freaking head of the or what's his
Grand Chancellor.
Grand Chancellor, yeah. The word was escaping me. Yeah, and still hiding his dark side. We're going to see how they hide that dark side. That's been sort of a question a lot of people would ask. Is it even realistic that that these Sith could be right there under the Jedi's nose and hide it from them? And we find out that this is something they've been cultivating and learning how to do for a while. So it's not just something that comes out. It's not just a convenient little part of the story or anything.
Malwinius, hard to see the rest of it, mentioned Shatterpoint. It's like, yeah, that was a good book.
Yeah, we did a book study of Shatterpoint.
We did Shatterpoint.
Yeah. If you look on my videos previously, I put them in playlists. I need to make one for this one, but I've got a playlist for Shatterpoint, a playlist for the Darth Bane trilogy, and so forth. The Thrawn trilogy is what we started out on, and so forth. So, all right. So as Plagueis is coming down to Muun, we find out that Muun is set up with a skyhook. You might have heard that phrase before in a lot of the EU books and whatnot. The skyhook is that they can be more or less elaborate, depending on the planet's wealth. But Muun has a very elaborate skyhook. They call it the what do they call it affectionately? It says to maintain that pristine blue realm, because it's got these beautiful blue skies of Muun. It's such a beautiful homeworld. To maintain that pristine blue realm, to prevent it from being sullied by drop ships, shuttles, or landing craft, the Muons had erected the most costly skyhook of its kind anywhere outside of the core. The financial funnel, they affectionately call it. And skyhooks can be like landing pads. Almost think of like the Cloud City of Vespin, but they would be able to transport you down to the planet too. The more elaborate ones anyway. So it's a way of keeping the air traffic and the spaceships themselves up out of the atmosphere. And it says, while the stately tower seemed to speak to the Muun's high regard for aesthetics and ecology, its true purpose was to keep visitors from setting foot on Muunilinst, thereby safeguarding the planet's wealth of resources and keeping secret the lavish lifestyles of those who had ascended to the top of the food chain. So we find out that Muunilinst is a planet pretty rich in natural resources and whatnot, and they're trying to keep it that way.
And it sounds like the entire race is pretty well off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We meet a couple of people as Magister Damask is there, unannounced and whatnot. We meet Hill is an older Muun who serves as kind of like his assistant or whatever, but he doesn't know about his Sith world or anything. But he's just an older Muun that serves as his business, associate or whatever, kind of like administrative assistant, almost you might call it. Hill, and then we find out the this chairman of the banking clan, who's kind of a opponent, Tanith, an opponent of Higo Damask, because his real name is there. It says, where and when can I be of service, Chairman? Plagueis says that. Tanith straightened. Your clan father would be proud. Damask looked Tanith in the eye. I take that as a compliment. How else would I mean it, Magister? When the banking clan members had moved off and Damask's group was back in motion, Damask glanced at Hill, his assistant. Someday we will topple the Taniths from their lofty perch. Hill smiled with his eyes. I hope I'm alive to see that day. And just so you know, Higo, your father would be proud. Chairman Tanith's sarcasm notwithstanding. You would know better than most. So we got some backstory there that we don't quite know the whole story about, but there's something about Higo's dad. There's something about his clan anyway. And he's trying to topple the Tonith, the chairman or whatever there, because we got different clans on Muunilinst and whatnot. We do find out Hugo, or Magister Damask, Plagueis, says that he tells Hill about the Bith. He calls him something. He calls him by his name. What was his name? Rugus Gnome is dead. That's the Bith, Hill said in astonishment. How? Where? Of no relevance, Damask said, remembering. Eventually, Gnome's estate will pass to us, but that won't be for some time to come, since it's unlikely that his body will ever be found. Hill didn't bother asking for details. We'll allow a standard year to pass, then we'll petition the probate courts to render a decision, at the very least of whatever assets are contractually ours. You are the executor in any case, are you not? Damask nodded. Ultimately, we'll be liquidating most of his estate, but there are several antiques of a curious sort I plan to retain. So we're going to find out about those here in a second. My boss is calling me. I need to go check on what's going on real quick. I'll let you wax poetic about something or another while I'm
Oh, wax poetic. I hope everyone's enjoying our little look into the EU. If anybody has any questions, be glad to answer them. Plagueis is a badass, that he is. I think most people agree that the EU would have been the smart move for Disney to tap, instead of doing what they did, and quite frankly are continuing to do with certain characters that should be left to the hill. Well, what's my favorite novel? We did the Thrawn trilogy, of course, that's classic, but I really enjoyed the Kenobi novel that we did. Obi-Wan, kind of like a nice old Western story. I really did enjoy that one.
Every time I have to leave Al, this is like all the way back in the old office hours days too. Every time I have to leave Al for a second, the scene plays in my head of Wayne's World when Wayne walks off the set and Garth is left there. The camera, they're like live, and Garth's like, "I'm having a good time." Not.
Well, I already mentioned, that I had a review and everything. I was like, "Oh, what else am I going to talk about? I'll just answer any questions you have."
Okay, so the part we want to end on here is when Magister Damask finally makes his way to his own home estate, and he brings 114D there. We find that there are tunnels and whatnot under the ground, because Munes have all these secret passages and whatnot, but Higo Damask's own, Darth Plagueis' own set of tunnels there, he goes in and he's got these experiments set up. He tells 114D, he says, "You will come to find yourself at home here as I have." "I'm certain I will, Magister Damask," 114D said, its photoreceptors registering a dozen different types of droids in a single glance. Memo droids, G&K power droids, even a prototype Ubicanian surgical droid. "In time, we'll see about having your original appendages restored so that you can earn your keep." Now we go through, and 114D sees his library. It says the Munes were said to abhor literature and to loathe keeping records of anything other than loan notices, actuarial tables, and legal writs. And yet, Plagueis was guardian of one of the finest libraries to be found anywhere outside of the Voraskai or the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. He's got all of these literature from everybody, ancient histories of the Rakata and the Vujant. The Rakata, if you played, Knights of the Old Republic or read the Dawn of the Jedi comics, the Rakata were the first dark side users. The Jedi they lived in a balance of the dark and light side, and the Rakatans came in fully embracing the dark side, which kind of pushed people to fully embrace the light side as a way of combating that. So we're going back and touching on old EU stuff. The Order of the Dai Bendu, the Jedi in their beliefs came out of the Dai Bendu monks, as we find out in the Dawn of the Jedi age and whatnot. Annals of the Sorceress of Tund and of the Queen Amanoa of Onderon. This is Knights of our Tales of the Old Republic, Tales of the Jedi kind of stuff. Biological studies and so forth. Deeper in the mountain were laboratories where Plagueis' real work took place. And this is where he gets a little sick.
Mm-hmm.
Confined to cages, stasis fields, bioreactors, and bacta tanks were life forms brought to Muunilinst from across the galaxy, many from the galaxy's most remote worlds. Some were creatures of instinct, and others were semi-sentient. Some were immediately recognizable to 114D. Others resembled creatures concocted from borrowed parts. Some were newly birthed or hatched, and some looked as if they were being kept at death's door. More than a few were the subjects of ongoing experiments in what seemed to be vivisection or interbreeding, and others were clearly in suspended animation. So he's torturing these creatures. Not
kind of like the island of Dr. Moreau, man.
Yeah, it's sick. Now he doesn't have. He said at the most they're semi-sentient, so it's still horrible. But it's animals basically at the most part. We don't really have a sentient being, a human, as we would think.
At least to his way of thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, who's to say?
Yeah.
But I just as an aside, just something really funny. One of the words that kind of makes me cringe a lot: vivisection.
I know it's
that's just a.
It's a rough word.
It's a cringe word for me.
It is. It's horrible. So we find that he's interested in acquiring knowledge, right? And he wants 114D to eventually scan all of this knowledge, in databanks and whatnot. But the crucial work here is to live forever. As we say here, let me see. Make sure I'm reading the right part. I can't find the exact. It might be here when I'm about to read, but he talks about how true eternal life is what his goal is. Not essence transfer, not transferring his consciousness to a clone. He wants his body to live forever. Because 114D asks, what's our goal here? And he says it's eternal life. And 114D is like, well, I have no notion of that, and he says, no, it's there. If one accepted tales handed down in accounts of hologrons, ancient Sith had known how to accomplish this essence transfer, but had the Sith like Naga Sadow and Exar Kun genuinely been more powerful, or had they benefited from the fact that the dark side had been more prominent in those bygone eras? Some commentators claim that the ability to survive death had been limited to those with a talent for sorcery and alchemy, and that the use of such practices actually predated the arrival of the Dark Jedi exiles on Korriban. That's interesting. So, the knowledge of Sith sorcery, was that with the Sith people there before the Dark Jedi came there and turned Sith into the synonymous word with the dark side? Mm. But sorcery had been employed less to extend life then than to create illusions, fashion beasts, and resurrect the dead. Powerful adepts were said to have been able to saturate the atmosphere of planets with dark side energy, compel stars to explode, or induce paralysis in crowds, as Exar Kun apparently did to select members of the Republic Senate. Other adepts use sorcery merely as a means to better understand ancient Sith spells and sigils. It talks about Darth Bane discovering it and Darth Zana being adept at it. And if you want to get the backstory on all of this, again, it's Tales of the Jedi, the comics, so good. Definitely, or the radio dramas. I'll listen to a little bit of one, but they'll tell you the stories of Exar Kun and so forth.
But you were talking about Plagueis' thing. I think I got the section if you want me to read it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and read it.
Plagueis had no interest in being a lingering, disembodied presence, trapped between worlds and powerless to affect the material realm except through the actions of weak-minded beings he could goad, coax, or will into action. Nor did he seek to shunt his mind into the body of another, whether an apprentice, as Bane was thought to have attempted, or some vat-grown clone. Nothing less than immortality of his body and mind would suffice. Everlasting life.
Yeah, so good. So this is his goal.
Oh, vat-grown clone, kind of
vat-grown clone. Yeah.
I don't know if was this written before or after that dumpster fire of a last one.
Well, the interesting thing is that we know this. At the time Plagueis was written, we've known that Sidious would go on to do that. That's part of Shadows of the Empire, or and stuff like that. So it's an interesting. We're going to see why Sidious would settle for that or choose that rather than continuing the work of Plagueis here. But Plagueis is feeling that that quickening still. We have this moment where it kind of fully culminates, and that's why I wanted to read up until chapter 5, because the next chapters really get on into the major plot of the story here. But it says and I'll read a little, kind of an extensive bit, these 2 paragraphs. For the first time, he could feel the force of the dark side, not as a mere supporting wind, fluffing the sails of a pleasure boat, but as a hurricane, eager to loose a storm of destruction on the crumbling Republic and the indolent Jedi Order. A scouring storm that would lay waste to everything antiquated and corrupt, and pave the way for a new order in which the Sith would be returned to their rightful place as the stewards of the galaxy, and before whom all the diverse species would bow, not only in obeisance and fear, but in gratitude for having been drawn back from the brink. So his idea here, like we said, let's get the Sith away from this rule of 2 back to an empire. And in doing that, it's actually going to be good for the galaxy, bring the galaxy back from the brink. The task before him was at once invigorating and daunting. And in the eye of that cycloning storm, he could hear the faraway voices of all those who had laid the groundwork of the Sith imperative, the grand plan, those who had enlivened the hurricane with their breath and lives, Darth's Bane and Xana, and on down through the generations that included Cognis, Vectis, Ramaj, and Tenebrus. 100 years earlier, Tenebrus's Twi'lek master had opened a small rend in the fabric of the Force, allowing the dark side to be felt by the Jedi Order for the first time in more than 800 years. That had been the inauguration, the commencement of the revenge of the Sith. And now the time had come to enlarge that rend into a gaping hole, a gaping wound into which the Republic and the Jedi Order would to their own hazard be drawn. Really cool way to end chapter 5, which is basically the end of... Sorry, guys. Sorry, it's something in my throat. To end the introduction. We even have that word, Revenge of the Sith. This is the inauguration that will have its commencement in the Revenge of the Sith, consciously knowing that that's the name of the 3rd movie, and leading us there. So everything we're doing now, Luceno is signaling, is tied to the prequels. It's tied to Sidious's grand plan. It's tied to the fall of the Empire that we know is coming and that we know so much about. So we're going to see, and in seeing, it's not just a prequel story. It's not just learning the narrative that took place before that. It's actually further understanding it, further developing it, further understanding what's going on. It's pretty fascinating. So anyway, that's what I got to say about that there. Sorry. What are your thoughts on that, Al, as we end it there?
Just looking forward to seeing how this all will lead into what is to come, the rise of the apprentice Sidious. Really looking forward to that. It's just a great time in that before time of what we truly know from the films.
Yeah. And it really does, like I was saying in our intro video, this novel, like I just said too, it's not just, it's a backstory for Sidious. Not really. I mean, we do find out some things about Sidious becoming the apprentice and so forth, but you really don't get into Sidious's head. It really doesn't take him away from his elemental status as a villain at all. Mm-hmm. More than just sort of a backstory of Sidious or a narrative that happened beforehand, it really is a profound deepening of the Star Wars saga. It really is a profound deepening of the Sith mission and their motivations and intentions and machinations, while we know the prophecy of the Force was trying to bring about Anakin, ultimately Luke, who would bring balance to it. So it really is this epic story of good and evil. And this story is kind of the explanation of what the evil is doing at that moment. We will get a lot of good versus evil, a lot of sort of serpent in the Garden of Eden kind of imagery. Plagueis is very much that, trying to toy with life, trying to be God himself, trying to exert mastery over everything and whatnot. So it's interesting. I don't want to go too far, but it's good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now the important question: what are we going to read for next time? The thing I'm always supposed to have figured out beforehand that I never do.
I have a prediction.
Sure,
I have a prediction. Yes.
See, the key is to try to figure out a good chunk that's readable, not too much, but also a good stopping point, like for the next sort of section, a good act or whatever. I don't know. What are you thinking while I'm going through here?
9 through 9.
Yeah, I'm thinking 10 will be a little too much. Let me see. Yeah, I think all the way through 10 would be too much. I think 9 is actually a better digestible portion, but also story-wise, it gives us a good stopping point before we really get into.
Q.
Yeah. We are going to meet Palpatine. Like I said, in this book, we're going to meet Palpatine. We're going to meet Darth Maul. We're going to meet Padme. Eventually, even Anakin. Like I said, it's not just a. This has happened all before that. No, this plays into all the way up through.
Spoilers.
Well, no, I said that in the introduction.
I'm just joking.
It's it's that kind of. So it's not like a prequel. It really is a further explanation of what we already have, and it's so great in that sense. Mm-hmm. So that's what I got. Like I said, I will be back tomorrow night at some point. I do still have my daughter tomorrow night, which I don't usually have her Saturday nights, but I wanted her something for Father's Day on Sunday morning. So, but I will still stream tomorrow night whenever I get back from Mass, whenever she's kind of quieted down, like she's been tonight. She's been pretty good there tonight, just sort of hanging out, occasionally asking for milk refills. So, yeah, I'll be back streaming tomorrow night for probably usual hours, talking about Father's Day stuff. Fan Man, catch Second Cup Cafe tomorrow. Are you doing a movie stream tomorrow night, Al, or is that next week?
That I am tomorrow night, 10 o'clock on Big Al Presents. Going to be watching Support Your Local Gunfighter, starring James Garner, Jack Elam, a nice classic comedy western. Have a lot of fun with
James
that
Garner
one.
June, right?
Yep. Well, this is 2 films. Yeah, this is we just Support Your Local Gunfighter a couple weeks ago, and that was I love that movie, and just thought do both of them. They did 2 in the Support Your Local ... kind of thing.
Yeah.
But and then of course July is Kai July. Or Giant Monster July. So gonna have a lot of fun with that too.
Yeah. And I will try my best, like I said, to stream before you get started, or at least not go too far into your streaming there. It's all about schedule, so we'll do that. Chris is doing Hammond is doing a stream tomorrow, right? Or he told me he was. Do you know what time it is?
I guess so. He keeps changing the time. Sometimes it's 12:05. Sometimes it's 12:30. Who knows?
One question for us. Sorry. Keep posted. Yeah.
I was just keep an eye on YouTube, and I don't know if he has created a link yet, but I'll check to see if he's created a link here.
One more question for us, Al. Did you want to do these next 4 chapters next Friday, or do you want to wait 2 weeks?
Next Friday's fine with me.
You sure? Okay. All right.
Yeah, like I said, me doing a Friday stream is it's a rarity.
Sure.
Okay. And no, he hasn't posted anything new. He hasn't done a new stream yet.
He did tell me he was going to do a Father's Day style stream, so that'd be cool. All right, folks. Well, thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Catch us back for more of the Darth Plagueis saga here next Friday. Until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue Star Wars stories you love.
Bye, everybody.